Hi, fight fans. Welcome to episode 4 of Puncher's Chance. I'm Anthony Balester here with Brett Cagle, bringing you another great episode of Fight News and Puncher's Chance. We got a lot to get into. We got a lot of things to break down and preview, mainly the Jake Paul and Mike Perry fight. But make sure you're following Puncher's Chance podcast at all social medias at Punch ETB. Make sure to follow the Empty the Bench podcast network on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. Also, make sure to follow the YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network for all our shows and all of our other ETB Network shows. If you can't watch Puncher's Chance, put your AirPods in and listen to us on the road whenever you can.
Puncher's Chance is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together, where everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching the commentators and communities you care about, win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule.
So we got a lot of stuff to break down, a lot of fights. But before we get into the fights, we got to talk about one of the biggest news of the week. Of course, Conor McGregor is always tweeting out things and always trying to, break the news himself. He stated that he did speak with Dana White and that he will be fighting in 2024 for sure. It's undecided which pay-per-view card that they'll decide to give him. Right now, if I had to guess, I would probably say UFC 310, probably in December. But what are your thoughts about this, Brett?
Yeah, I think December is probably the logical choice for it. It's hard for me to get too excited right now about a Conor McGregor Michael Chandler fight, considering we've been promised this fight for the last year and a half. We were within 3 weeks of seeing it in June, and then kind of had the rug pulled out from underneath us there and didn't get the fight. So, if he does end up fighting Michael Chandler in December, it'll be a great fight. But I'm going to only truly believe it when I see these two guys officially making weight and in the cage.
Yeah, 100%. Even them announcing a fight at this point doesn't mean anything. Even when they're doing promos for the fight and we're a few weeks out, it doesn't mean anything. Like you said, Brett, until we see these two guys step in the octagon and that bell gets rung and we see Mike Buffer pumping us all up, that's the only time it's going to feel for real. Up until then, you never know. Like we stated before, Conor McGregor's got a lot of money, so maybe he's not so hungry as he used to be. Michael Chandler obviously is super, super desperate, and he's going to do whatever he can to make this fight happen. But McGregor, not so much. I think he does want to get into the octagon. At the end of the day, that's what he's passionate about. He's a fighter. That's what he loves to do. And I think he's still got that urge. This is probably the longest time since he started mixed martial arts that he hasn't fought in this long. So he's definitely got to be itching to get back in there. And I really, really think, Dana White wants to get this done in 2024. He doesn't want to drag this out any longer. We feel like if this gets into 2025, each and every month that goes by, I feel like this fight's going to get less and less, hype and less want from the fans. And Dana White knows that, and Conor McGregor knows that. So I think the best thing to do is try to get him in there for UFC 310. And honestly, Brett, if something happens again and 310 can't happen, I think the Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor fight needs to just be scrapped altogether.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. One of the things that really frustrates me as a fight fan is, seeing Conor McGregor pull out with an apparent toe injury is what we were told. And then he's on Instagram jogging over the weekend at almost full sprint. So, obviously he wasn't that injured. Whatever reason that he really pulled out of that fight, I guess we won't know. But, as long as he's healthy and in the game and has his mind motivated, I think he has a chance to be in contention. I think he still has a chance to beat Michael Chandler. Chandler also hasn't fought for an extended period of time, just like him. He's been waiting. So, I hope they can get it together, because Michael Chandler has really wasted the second half of his UFC career here waiting for this Conor McGregor fight.
Yeah, he's definitely banking on a huge payday. They definitely, have reported that this payday is going to equal up, I think, 10 of his fights. So it definitely will pay off if it happens. But as you stated before, with McGregor having a minor toe injury, it didn't seem like something that McGregor couldn't fight through. The old Conor McGregor, the hungry Conor McGregor would have fought through it. Obviously, this one, not so much.
Yeah.
Um,
Still an
but
interesting
obviously,
fight, though, and I hope McGregor can get back in there. And if he does, do you think that this extended layoff and the injury, favors Michael Chandler? We were both kind of leaning towards McGregor as the fight got close to it, but has your opinion changed at all?
my opinion hasn't changed at all. I still think McGregor's going to go out there and get the job done. I don't think nothing has changed. If anything, I think this may help on McGregor because I just think as more and more time goes on, I think more and more he gets stronger, more and more training he does. Because obviously, when he first got that really significant lower leg injury, he wasn't able to fight for a while. So I think each and every month that he gets extra training in, I think it's going to only help him. I think Michael Chandler could only do so much at this point. I think he's just kind of like stagnant. But I do think McGregor, it favors him the longer the fight takes to happen.
Yeah, and if they did have it in December, that would give him a full training camp and be able to get back in there and sparring and get those rounds in, so he has his timing back too. So I really think that these next 4 months for McGregor are really big, and I'm interested to see what his training looks like going forward.
And I think both these guys have got different types of motivations. I feel like this is the end game for Michael Chandler. Once he gets this fight, that's his goal. I think McGregor, this is just, a prelim to what's going to be, a precursor to what he wants to do. I think he wants to channel this fight to maybe get a rematch with Dustin Poirier or maybe get a fight with Charles Oliveira. I think that's what he wants to do, and maybe even challenge for the 170 or the 155 belt. Being with McGregor and given the name and cachet he has, he's not going to have to do too much to earn a title shot, given his name. And I think, he just wants to get Chandler done and over with in 2024. And then 2025, he can really look to see, what else other matchups, are out there for him.
Yeah. The stakes are really the highest they've been for him in his career, though. He goes out there and looks impressive against Michael Chandler. Like you were saying, he could easily be thrown into a title shot, especially at 155 pounds. But this fight's going to be at 170. So, it's up in the air there, too. So, but if he loses, we're talking about possible retirement. So there really is a lot of risk for McGregor in this next fight. And it's probably the biggest one of his career.
Yeah, I definitely think he's got more to lose and more to gain than Michael Chandler. If Michael Chandler wins, I don't really think it does too much for him. Everybody's going to be like, you beat up an old, washed Conor McGregor. If he loses, he still got what he wanted. He still gets the sponsorship deals. He still gets the publicity. He gets the main event, and he gets the money. So he gets everything that he wanted to get. McGregor, on the other hand, if he wins, he gets to prolong his career. If he loses, I really don't think there's another matchup for him at this point.
No, I don't either.
But, that brings us to what is going to be the biggest fight of the week, what most people are going to be talking about. It was supposed to be Mike Tyson, but I think we got an even better and more exciting matchup. We got Jake Paul going up against Mike Perry this weekend. What do you think about this, Brett?
Yeah, I think it's, definitely a more competitive matchup. And we've actually got some interesting news, fight fans, for you. Very exciting news. So join us on Puncher's Chance YouTube for a special watch-along of the Jake Paul versus Mike Perry fight this Saturday, July 20th. The two of us, Brett Cagle and Anthony Balester, alongside Pat Dana, producer of the MMA Outsiders, will be giving our live reactions to the co-main event between Amanda Serrano and Stevie Morgan, and, of course, the main event battle between Jake Paul and Mike Perry. Will Jake Paul mark off another name under his belt? Or will Mike Perry become the second to defeat Paul? We'll have to tune in this weekend to find out. But I'm really excited to have a live watch-along for this contest. As you were saying, this was supposed to be Mike Tyson, but he had an ulcer in his stomach, and I think that should be scrapped. I know that they rebooked it for November, but if Jake Paul goes and loses this fight this weekend, I don't think that that's really a possibility either. In my opinion, Tyson is too old to be fighting, and I'm glad that Mike Perry stepped up here. But when we're talking about who's the better technical boxer and who I think is going to have success in this fight, I think there's a reason that Jake Paul is a 3-1 favorite here. Mike Perry is the bare knuckle boxing champion, but toughness is his main thing. He can go in there and take any punch that someone's throwing at him without gloves. But his technique is not there, and I don't think he hits Paul, or he can hit Paul hard enough to really hurt him compared to who Paul has been going up against in sparring with real boxers and against some of his other fights. I don't know if Mike Perry would beat Nate Diaz, and we saw Jake Paul handle Nate Diaz. So Mike Perry's going to be significantly undersized. He's probably 20 to 30 pounds smaller than Tommy Fury was. We saw Tommy Fury really use his size and wear down Jake Paul in that matchup, which was his first loss. I don't think that Mike Perry's going to be able to do that. We're all expecting Mike Perry to come at him guns a-blazing recklessly and trying to knock his head off from the opening bell. So, we're going to see a fight. I wonder what Jake Paul's going to do in it. What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Jake Paul's definitely going to use his size. I mean, think about it. He was training to fight Tyson. He put on a lot of weight for that fight. Obviously, He's going to cut down some weight, but he's still going to have a lot of that mass still on him. He is a bigger guy and a bigger fighter. And if this was bare-knuckle boxing, I definitely would want to go with Mike Perry. But obviously, this is regular boxing, and it's all going to be about, how good you are technically, how good your skills are. And that's obviously going to favor Jake Paul. But it's going to be interesting, just like the name of our podcast, Puncher's Chance. You got to give Mike Perry a puncher's chance in this matchup. He's going to go in there, and, he's going to go, guns a-blazing, and he's going to lay everything out there. It may put him in danger. It may make him susceptible to be knocked out. But it's definitely going to give us an exciting matchup. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of these guys do get knocked out, or at least, TKO'd in this matchup. But I do think Jake Paul probably will get the win. I do think he's going to use that technical advantage over Mike Perry. I think he's going to outstrike him. And I just think at some point, Mike Perry is going to, lead himself out there to get hit. And Jake Paul is going to capitalize on it like we've seen with Ben Askren and, Nate Robinson and a lot of these other fighters. I do think Mike Perry is probably one of the tougher fighters that Jake Paul has fought up at this point. Tommy Fury is probably a little bit tougher. But Mike Perry is going to be tough for Jake Paul. But I still think Jake Paul will probably get another KO win in this one.
Yeah, I think this has potential to be the second most competitive matchup that Paul's been in. Obviously, Tommy Fury being the most competitive. But, I think that Jake Paul is going to be able to get this one done early, quite honestly. Perry's going to come at him aggressively. I think Paul's going to be able to pick his shot, counter him with something big, and then put it on Mike Perry. But, we got to give Perry a chance here. He's a UFC veteran. He's gone against Vicente Luque and all these guys. He's actually faced a former professional boxer in the past in Michael Seals. They fought in that triad like triangle thing that Frank Mir and Pulev were fighting in that same night. Perry actually beat Michael Seals. He got dropped in that fight, but won the other 2 rounds. So he has experience against professional boxers, but Michael Seals, competed at 140 to 160 pounds. Jake Paul is a very big guy, 6'1.5", 200 pounds plus. We'll see what he weighs in this weekend. But I got Jake Paul in this one, and I'm really interested for the fight.
Yeah, I'm definitely really interested. And like you said, up to this point, it's probably the second best fight and the second most hyped Jake Paul fight that we've had up to this point.
Yeah, I agree.
Obviously we got to break down UFC Denver. We had the main event. Rose Namajunas got the unanimous decision win over Tracy Cortez. Just like I predicted. I think you, Brett, you did go with Tracy Cortez.
Yeah.
Definitely a very competitive fight. But I think Rose Namajunas definitely weighed on her as the fight went on. But what were your thoughts on this fight, Brett?
Yeah, so I kind of flip-flopped here. I went with Tracy Cortez on the show, and then when we came out with our blog midweek in my best bets, I went with Namajunas by points. I listened to Big John McCarthy before the contest, and he was really adamant that Rose's experience and the altitude was going to play a big factor. I guess I wasn't giving it that much of a thought, and you were all over this prediction from the beginning, Anthony. Rose really was the more experienced fighter, more well-rounded, actually took Tracy Cortez down late in the fight. Landed good punches on her early, actually knocked her eyelash off. I don't know if you saw that on the broadcast. That was pretty interesting. But, Tracy Cortez had to do whatever she had to get into this one. Struggled at the weight of making weight, had to cut hair off of her head to make the weight officially. So, Rose Namajunas went out there and really put on a veteran performance against someone who was taking a step up in competition in their first time in a 5-round fight.
Yeah, and I think this is really going to hurt the stock of Tracy Cortez, not only because of the loss, but I think mainly because of what happened with that weight. I mean, if you got to cut your hair to make weight, I mean, a lot of people are going to question, her dedication to making that weight. It's the biggest fight of your life to come in there and fight Rose Namajunas. What an opportunity. And for you to have to cut your hair to make weight. I mean, I know it wasn't a full training camp. I think it was a short notice because she wasn't the original fighter. So that may be a good, excuse for it. But still, at the end of the day, I think some people may question her on that. And it did look like she had everything going for her. But hey, if she comes back and, makes weight and has another good fight, I think she can be right back in an opportunity like this within another win.
Yeah, I think she can as well. And I honestly don't think it damages her stock as much as we may think. I think that she could use this as a learning experience. Rose didn't finish her. She probably taught her some lessons in there about cardio. And then also, her elusivity on the feet as well. Rose didn't get hit much in this contest. And Tracy didn't really get anything going on the feet. She had some success in the takedowns early. She's a very athletic fighter, well-rounded, but Rose Namajunas, proved to be a level above in this one.
Yeah, as much as I could, put down Tracy Cortez, I equally have to, prop up Rose Namajunas. Up to this point, this was probably her best performance at the flyweight division. She really looked good, and I remember, coming into this matchup, Brett, you were saying how she hasn't looked so great at this weight class, and there may have became a point to where maybe she would have to decide if she would have to go back down in weight. But this was definitely a great performance, and she showed that I think she belongs in this division. And I definitely think this may be propel her to either fighting in a number one contenders match or, a title shot definitely in the future. And she's a legend of the game. And I do think she's going to be a fight or two away from really being a serious contender in this division.
Yeah, I mean, Minot for Rose stock has to, improve off this too, because she kind of soundly beat Rose. And then Rose comes and bounces back with two wide victories over Amanda Ribas and Tracy Cortez, two viable contenders here. I don't think Rose is in line for a title shot quite yet. She mentioned maybe a women's BMF title between her and Jessica Andrade, a trilogy there. I wouldn't mind seeing that. We've seen Andrade at 125, 135, and also 115. So she's fought at all weight classes and is a good competitor. That fight wouldn't, I wouldn't mind seeing that fight. And if Rose wanted to go back down to 115, I think that a title opportunity could be there almost immediately the time she went back down, because she has wins over Weili Zhang. And, I think that that's a fight that could sell on a co-main event of a pay-per-view.
Now, since the fight was so decisive, do you think there's any possible way that, I know she's probably thinking title shot for Note, but what about a rematch with Rose? Do you think that would be a possibility right now or not?
I think I think that it was so close. She already beat her this year or, within the last calendar year. And she probably wants the rewards and benefits for winning that fight the first time, does Minot for Rose. So I think that she deserves the next title opportunity, and that Rose is probably one or two fights away.
Yeah, I agree. The next fight we're going to talk about wasn't the main event, but it definitely could have been. I think this not only was the fight of the night, but honestly, this was probably one of the best fights I've seen all year. What a brawl. What a just straight up all-out brawl between the great, Gene Silva and Drew Dober. You definitely can't question these guys' toughness and these guys' dedication after this fight. Gene Silva coming in there on such a quick turnaround and getting another finish in the UFC. That gash from Drew Dober was very, very bad. The fact that he wanted to continue fighting and try to finish it out goes to show you his toughness. And, he's a veteran of a game, and he's a former ranked, lightweight. But Gene Silva, a natural featherweight, they come in on short notice after just going through a whole training camp and a fight, getting the finish win, and then to go in there and do to Drew Dober what he did. It was nothing short of spectacular, and I think, it may establish Gene Silva as one of the best prospects and up, rising stars in the UFC. I think he's got options after this. Drew Dober is the guy who's probably considered just outside the lightweight rankings, and for him to beat him, I think this gives him options to either fight, a top 15 featherweight or a top 15 lightweight. He's got, all the stock going for him. And I'm very, very impressed with Gene Silva. But what were your thoughts, Brett, and how impressed have you been by Gene Silva over the last 2 weeks?
Man, I'm very high on Gene Silva. Coming in here and finishing two veteran names back-to-back in two weight classes like Charles Jourdain and Drew Dober. Beats Drew Dober in his own backyard in Denver. I had this one over 1.5 in rounds because I knew Gene Silva had never been finished. He's so tough. He's got a neck that I don't think you could get under for submissions. He's muscle bound. He's a very strong and athletic guy. And Dober was fighting in his hometown and didn't want to go down easily. And even was telling the referee, as his eyelids basically hanging off his head that he can continue fighting. And Dober showed heart and fought well, actually. He hit Silva, even right before they stopped the fight, he hit him with a Superman punch that might have been one of his best strikes of the whole fight. And, Dober is a very good finisher. He's a guy who's got, over 15 knockouts on his professional record. The punching stats in this one were very similar. Drew Dober actually landed more, 59 to 53, but the damage behind Gene Silva's punches, are just incredible. He got Charles Jourdain out of there because, Jourdain couldn't really throw any power at him to keep him off him, got inside the distance and ended up finishing that fight. And it was a similar situation this weekend. Silva just kind of comes at you aggressively, wants to see what you have and test you out in the opening rounds, and then tries to walk you down and put big power on you after that. I've been really impressed with Gene Silva. We haven't really seen his ground game get tested so far, but in these all-out brawls against action fighters, he's proving to be, someone new that we're going to have to watch out for.
Yeah, I've been very, very impressed with his, his striking department. I think his boxing and striking is top tier. I've been very, very impressed with him. And like you said, every time someone gets close or gets inside, he really, really lays down some damage. And there was a lot of times in this fight where I think both ways. I think there was times where Drew Dober was landing stuff and times where Gene Silva was landing stuff that I thought, this could be it. This could be a finish. But both guys were toughing it out. And I really don't think Drew Dober's stock should be hurt at all from this fight. I think Gene Silva is a great fighter, and I think Drew Dober is a great fighter. I think both these guys gave it all they had. And I think Drew Dober and Gene Silva should both be looking at, highly marketable matchups after this. But I think Gene Silva's got to get a ranked opponent. One guy that really, really stood out to me, I really think Gene Silva should go to featherweight. I think given his height, I think that would be his best division if he can make the weight. And I would like to see him, maybe fight a guy like Sean Woodson. Sean Woodson's a really, really tall, lanky guy for featherweight. He can strike as well. And I would really, really like to see Gene Silva's length and reach tested. And I think that would be the perfect featherweight to test that. And what would be another test for Gene Silva?
Yeah, I think that's a great matchup. As you said, if he's too short for 155 pounds, let's find out with the tallest guy at 145 pounds and Sean Woodson. Sean Woodson's 6'3" down there in the featherweight division. That's a really big and lengthy guy. But when you look at Gene Silva, as a prospect right now, hopes are high because, recently Ilia Topuria was the last guy we saw jump between 145 and 155. Ilia Topuria goes up to 155, knocks out Jai Herbert in England, comes back down to 145, got wins over Josh Emmett and Bryce Mitchell. So, we've seen this kind of happen in the past with these guys with big power. Topuria is not the biggest guy in the world either and is actually an inch shorter than Silva. I've been kind of thinking about that matchup, what it would potentially look like, Gene Silva and Ilia Topuria, and that would be an absolute war. So we'll see how far Silva can take it. I like the Sean Woodson fight that you threw out there. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a better name than that. I'd like to see the length be tested as well. If he can get inside on Woodson, who's a former professional boxer, then Gene Silva might be something really special.
Hey, Brett, it's so funny that, you compared him to Topuria, because I was thinking that as well. And I really, really wanted to say when he's, striking and he's in the middle of that octagon striking with Drew Dober, his technique kind of resembles, Ilia. I just didn't want to make that comparison because Ilia is the champion of the world. And it's hard to, compare anybody, particularly a guy like Gene Silva to him. But, hey, everybody starts somewhere. And a few years ago, this is just where Ilia was. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Gene Silva maybe have a similar rise. I would be frightened for any featherweight that steps in the ring with him right now.
Yeah, I mean, guys like Charles Jourdain and Drew Dober, one win over one of those guys, kind of stamps you in as a household name moving forward and someone the promotion's going to get behind. He's gotten 2 wins over those guys in 2 weight classes. Those are better than the names that I just threw out there for Topuria when Topuria went up to 155. And fought Jai Herbert. He's not necessarily on the same level that Drew Dober is, name value and recognition wise. So, Gene Silva picked up a pair of really big wins over the last month. And I'd like to actually see him take a little bit of time off before he comes back and kind of, try and get the weight under control to see if he can actually make 145 pounds.
Yeah, I would like to definitely see him give it until at least end of the year. I would like to only see him fight one more time in 2024, particularly maybe November, December. Get on one of those last cards. Maybe even at this point, if he could get like a main event at a UFC Apex
Yep.
at the end of the year, I think that would be ideal for him.
Yeah, I agree.
Our next fight was definitely a huge upset. Definitely one that we didn't see coming. Someone that we were super super high on. Christian Rodriguez got upsetted and was submitted by Julian Erosa. Julian Erosa, came in this matchup. Was trying to strike with Christian Rodriguez, and looks like Rodriguez was getting the best of him. It looks like Rodriguez was winning the fight. And then even when Julian Erosa took it to the ground, Rodriguez escaped the hold. But then he ran into another hold that he could not get out of. And unfortunately for Christian Rodriguez, it's a tough loss. And you know what? I really sit there and think about Christian Rodriguez. Has he really been the same at 145 as he was at 135? I feel like at 135, he was a lot more dominant. He looked great against Ron Rojas Jr. He looked like he was on his way to maybe potentially being a top 15 bantamweight. But we've seen against his last fight against Isaac Delgarian, I thought he lost that fight. I had the scorecard for Delgarian in that one. I know a lot of people had that 50-50. So he didn't look good in that matchup, and obviously he lost this one. So I think Christian Rodriguez, I think at this point, he's got to go back down to 135. I'm not sure if it's an issue of him not being able to make the weight, if he has to stay at 145. But in my opinion, I think he needs to move down to 135. But what do you think about that, Brett?
I got a couple, I think a couple things about it. One, I didn't think that Rodriguez necessarily looked great at 145 pounds physically. When you looked at his body at 135 pounds, he looked, cut up and fighting shape. This weekend he kind of looked pudgy and soft around the edges. I don't know if this was a guy who transformed his body to move up in weight, or someone who was just kind of trying to fight at their natural weight and thought that they could beat Erosa, who had been knocked out 8 times and twice in his last 3 fights. But as you were mentioning, Erosa was losing early. He was getting caught clean by Rodriguez, who was walking him down. He takes the fight to the ground, gets the body triangle on the ground, and holds control there for about 2 minutes. And then Christian Rodriguez makes one of the most mind-boggling decisions that I've seen yet, watching this. After just getting out of a terrible position on the ground, jumps back into the guard of Julian Erosa and almost immediately gets guillotined in the fight ends. All he had to do, in my opinion, was stand back up. He would have found a home for big punches like he was earlier on the feet, and maybe gotten Erosa out of there. But he really jumped into Erosa's guard and gave him a victory, in my opinion. It was a low fight IQ moment that Rodriguez is probably going to want back.
Yeah, obviously a win's a win. So you always got to improve your stock after a win. But I don't think this win does too much for Julian Erosa. Like you said, Rodriguez gave it to him. But I do think Rodriguez needs to really look himself in the mirror. And I think his best, potential is that bantamweight. I think he needs to move down in the division. But Julian Erosa said coming to this fight, he was like, I felt like I was the bigger guy. I wanted to prove a point to see if I could strike with this guy. So I wanted to strike with him. And I felt like if I ever got in danger, I could bring it to the ground any moment and end the fight. I mean, he was correct. Rodriguez did get out of the first hold and then, made that, stupid mistake and cost him the fight. But Erosa, had the game plan, and his game plan, definitely, went 100% correct.
Yeah, he had like 12 submission wins on his record coming in, and if you're Rodriguez's team and you're thinking about this fight, and a guy has 12 submission wins and he's been chinned 8 times, it has to be in the game plan that if we're on the ground in these scrambles, that we want to work back to our feet where we think we have the advantage. It is just very confusing. I thought that Rodriguez showed, tremendous smarts in his victory versus Raul Rosas. I thought he was a more experienced fighter than Rosas and kind of taught him a lesson that night. That's why I was so confused with the poor decision that he made this weekend. But Christian Rodriguez, we're still high on him. We still think he's a great fighter, especially at 135 pounds. Maybe he can make another run down there. I hope he can get the weight under control if that's the problem, to get back down to the bantamweight division.
Yeah, I'm still very high on him. Just the script has flipped. He's in the same position that we saw Raul Rojas when he fought Rodriguez. He just was obviously outmatched, fight IQ. And Rodriguez will have to, make similar adjustments. and have to really decide, does he want to, come into his next fight a lot more in shape and maybe not as, like you said, pudgy. And I do really think that would make a difference. And I think him and his coaches are going to have to decide long and hard what's the best division for his future.
Yeah, I agree. But great win for Rosa.
Yeah, it was definitely a great win for Julian Erosa. Like I said, I know it was a fight that was basically given to him, but a win's a win. And I think you got to, give him credit for knowing exactly what he needed to do to get the victory. He knew he had to win it on the ground. And you also got to give him respect for wanting to go in there and test to see if he could strike with them. So, I got respect for him, and, I give him props for going out there and getting the upset win that a lot of people didn't see coming.
Yeah.
We had actually two upsets this week. We had Charles Johnson going up against Josh Van. We were really, really hyping up Josh Van as one of these flyweights that was up and coming and on the rise. But Charles Johnson, got the upset KO win. We know when, the fight game, all it takes is one shot. Like we said before, puncher's chance. And it really seemed like Josh Van was winning the fight, but he was leaving himself susceptible for hits, and Charles Johnson capitalized and got a brutal uppercut to end this fight and give him the win. But how stunned were you, Brett, by this outcome?
I think I was more stunned by the Rodriguez one than this. Joshua Van is very young. Charles Johnson is not an old fighter either, 33 years old. Just defeated Jake Hadley, who I had a lot of, high praise for out of England before that fight. Wrestled him and was able to get an impressive victory there in St. Louis. And then, beats Joshua Van this weekend. Van looked good, I thought, early. Now, I don't know if it was altitude, and I don't want to put excuses for anybody, but it seemed to me like Joshua Van did slow down as the fight went. Early in the fight, in the first round, he was working the body of Johnson really well up against the cage. He was ripping off combinations, around the midsection that looked to be very damaging, and Charles was circling and kind of on the defensive. But, as the fight wore on, Johnson kind of, fought his way back into it, landed that big uppercut in the third, and when he landed that shot, it was all over.
Yeah, it was definitely a brutal hit and a brutal knockout. Mm-hmm. But like you said before, Josh Vaughn's one of the youngest fighters in the UFC at just the age of 22 years old. So he's got a lot of growth, and, most UFC fighters aren't undefeated for a reason. We've seen guys like Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier, Charles Oliveira lose a lot and lose often when they first came into the UFC. But young fighters usually tend to make adjustments, and it's better to get those losses in now and learn from them so that when he gets later into his career, it could definitely suit him and make him a better and more experienced fighter. But for Charles Johnson, he's a guy who a lot of people would say is one of the top 20 to 25 flyweights in the world. And he's just a guy that's just outside the rankings. And for him to beat a young killer like Josh Van, I think this should do a lot for him, and this should propel him into a higher mark matchup. I know, he did kind of get lucky with that one shot, and if that shot didn't happen, maybe Josh Van does come out with the win. But Charles Johnson capitalized and got a spectacular finish, and I think he deserves a higher ranked matchup. Not saying he should get a ranked opponent at all, but he definitely should get a higher ranked matchup going forward.
Yeah, I think he might even deserve a ranked opponent. He beat that Azat Maxim guy who was undefeated, 17-0, gave him his first loss to put him at 17-1, then beat Jake Hadley from England, who people had high hopes for, and then goes in there and beats Joshua Van as a 2-1 underdog again this weekend. I think he does deserve a ranked opponent next. It's going to be interesting. We've talked about flyweight extensively. It's really got a lot of depth to it right now, got a lot of guys who are booked up in matchups, but I think that Charles Johnson deserves a chance to get into the rankings, certainly, after 3 straight wins. Yep.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. We had another fight that maybe not have been, the most exciting fight. 2 OGs of the game. But, we got this one, incorrect. Muslim Salikov went in there and got the split decision over Santiago Ponzinibbio. It was definitely a very, very close fight. I wouldn't even be mad if they would have made this a draw. I feel like you could have went either or. But I probably would have slided slightly with Muslim Salikov. I think it was 1-1 heading into that final round. And I think maybe he did just slightly enough in that third round to come out with the win. But wasn't really impressed by either or fighter. We expected that coming into this fight. Both guys were over the hill. But how did you think about this fight, Brett?
Yeah, I actually had Salikov last week in this one, but this was a split decision. It was up in the air. Anybody could have won this fight. As you mentioned, they both kind of looked a little bit past their prime, but I thought there were some good exchanges on the feet. Salikov hit Ponzinibbio with a spinning kick in the second round that I thought was probably won him the round and was a good shot, and didn't stumble Ponzinibbio, but nonetheless was a significant strike. But Ponzinibbio in the third round had that takedown. I actually thought Ponzinibbio might have won the third round with the late takedown. He got up raising his hand thinking that he won. He's been involved in a lot of very close fights, Miguel Baeza amongst others, and this weekend. So Santiago Ponzinibbio doesn't really have the finishing ability, in my opinion, that he did once in his career, especially post-leg injury with that nasty staph infection that we talked about extensively on last week's episode. He almost lost him his life. Ponzinibbio, I think it's time for him to about hang it up. He's entering that stage about where Robbie Lawler was last year or 2 years ago, where he can't go up against these young and fresh contenders anymore, and is going to have to fight veterans like Salikov and people with name recognition moving forward. For Salikov, I don't think this necessarily leads him closer to a title opportunity or a ranking either, especially with this performance. Both kind of lackluster, but, he's a good fighter, a great striker, someone with creative, dynamic techniques. The spinning stuff's awesome and, gets fans going. But I'm not necessarily, looking forward to see his next performance.
Yeah, we said coming into this fight that most likely the loser of this fight would probably be fighting their last fight in UFC. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if the winner will be fighting their next last fight in UFC. Santiago Ponzinibbio never came back from that injury, and it's just unfortunate because he has so much high potential. And like we said, in his prime, he was definitely a much higher ranked fighter than Salikov. Yeah. But obviously Salikov right now seems to be the slightly better fighter. Like you said, they could have won either or. But because he gets the win, he will be able to get another fight in UFC. But, I think both these fighters are, towards the end. And either or probably got maybe one, at best, 2 fights left in them.
Yeah, I agree.
There was definitely a lot of other, exciting moments and, interesting fights that happened on UFC Fight Night Denver. One fighter that really stood out to me was Mateusz Jackson. He came in there and got a very, very quick win over Damon Blackshear. He showed tremendous striking and, landed some great, hits. And he's on a nice fight win streak in the bantamweight division. I know the bantamweight division is a stacked division, and there's a lot of guys right now clamoring and fighting to get, a ranked position and a ranked matchup. But I think Mateusz Jackson, with the fight win streak that he's on and the performances that he's put together, I think he's put his name in that hat with those other top guys just outside the bantamweight rankings. But what were your thoughts, Brett, on this, and what were some other things that stood out to you on the UFC Fight Night?
Yeah, Mateusz Jackson's finish was absolutely nasty. Straight punch right down the middle, almost the first punch that he throws the entire fight. 18 seconds, knocks out Damon Blackshear. And, Blackshear was the favorite in that fight and is a good grappler, just had a twister submission last year. So that was a great win for Mateusz Jackson. People thought that maybe his ground game would get tested in this one, but it didn't even get to that. 18 seconds in, lands one of the first punches he throws and finishes the fight. I thought that Andre Petroski and Evan Elder both put on pretty good performances. Both got wins on the ground, kind of showed that they're superior grapplers. Petroski was fighting Josh Fremd, who is a lengthy striker at 6'3", but he couldn't keep Petroski off him. Petroski, to me, he kind of reminds me of he doesn't remind me of Tito Ortiz exactly. Tito had some of the greatest ground and pound that we've seen in the sport, but Petroski, like Tito Ortiz, is a very strong specimen. He can go in there and get the submissions like the arm triangles and the guillotines and really impose his will on the ground. If Petroski could find a way to improve his ground and pound and finishing fights on top, I think that he could be a real presence in the middleweight division. When we've seen him fight guys like Michel Pereira and he's not been able to get the fight to the ground, he does struggle with his striking, which kind of reminds me a little bit like Tito Ortiz. But, I think that he has high potential if he can keep his mind going in the right direction and try and get these fights to the ground and not fight at other people's game plan.
Yeah, I agree. I was impressed by both of them. Like you said, Petroski is definitely a strong guy. And he's definitely got, potential. He may have to make some adjustments to become an all-around fighter. But I was definitely impressed by him. And, Evan Elder, his ground game was tremendous against Darius Flowers. He really, really controlled that matchup and definitely really, put his will and his strength, on display. I do want to shout out my lock of the week. I picked Gabriel Bonfim to get the win over Ange Luce. Luce definitely impressed me. I was questioning his toughness, but he stood in there and was able to, let it go the distance. Gabriel definitely had his moments, and definitely, landed some good strikes. But Luce was able to, toughen it out. And I take back everything I said about, what he looked like against Brian Battle. So he's gained my respect. But Bonefin continues to display great fights. And I'm interested to see where he goes. He didn't get the finish win. So it's not super, super exciting. It's not going to skyrocket him as much as if he did get a finish win. But a win's a win. And I'm interested to see what this win does for him. And it's definitely going to push him up the rankings and give him a tougher matchup going forward.
Yeah, after his first loss to Nicholas Dalby, he really needed to get his feet back underneath him with a win, and he did so this weekend. We both picked him by submission, but Angel Luce kind of had a point to prove after that Brian Battle fight and hung in there tough, like you were saying. I thought that he showed good moments as well. One judge actually gave him a round scoring the fight 29-28. I thought he did some good things on the feet, but Bonfim on the ground was, the better fighter, and that's what we thought kind of going in. But is there anything else that you liked at this UFC Denver Fight Night card?
No, I think that was pretty much it. That was all the guys that were pretty much impressed me. There was a lot of, I think this fight card gave us a lot of guys that maybe people weren't, known or expecting coming into this. But definitely some guys that are going to be known and, household names after this, fight card.
Yeah, I agree.
We had a lot of news and there's a lot of rumors swirling around about potential matchups. A matchup that, we have talked about and we predicted on the show, Ciryl Gane going up against Alexander Volkov in, what may be a number one contenders match. It's the fight that makes sense. It's the top two guys who I think aren't fighting for a title at this point right now. We got Aspinall and Blades. You got Stipe and Jones. I think Gane and Volkov are the top two guys outside of that. We know Ciryl Gane's been basically the top guy who's not a champion for a long time. That's why he got to fight John Jones. He's one of the best heavyweights in the world. And you got Volkov, who even at his old age, may be in the prime of his career. He's on a nice fight win streak. And getting that win over Sergey Pavlovich, I think is what's propelled him into this matchup. And I think the winner of this matchup probably sits out for a year and probably fights the winner of John Jones and Aspinall next. But what are your thoughts about this fight, Brett?
Yeah, I love this fight. Now we've got two guys from Europe, both strikers predominantly. Alexander Volkov, 6'7". He's going to have the length advantage, but Ciryl Gane is the better athlete. He might be a little bit better on the ground as well. I think these guys are going to, stand and trade. We just saw Alexander Volkov take on a guy in Sergey Pavlovich, who's a very strong and powerful athlete. Pavlovich at one time had knocked out 6 opponents in a row in the first round, and Volkov really picked him apart at range and put on one of the best performances we've seen in his career. In his last contest, he was even brushing his hair in the corner in between rounds. He was so unfazed. Now, going into this one, I don't think that there's going to be that level of comfortability in the fight. Ciryl Gane is as you mentioned, one of the best fighters in the world. He's extremely athletic. He's a guy who made Francis Ngannou shoot for takedowns. So when you stand and trade with Ciryl Gane, sometimes it doesn't work out for you. So I'm going to be interested to see in this matchup how much Alexander Volkov has improved.
Yeah, they fought last time and Ciryl Gane got the best of them, but I think Volkov's a way different fighter than he was at that point. But like you said, it's going to be interesting. Ciryl Gane, is definitely a better striker. He's a power puncher too, like Sergey, but I think he's better technical. He's able to, sit there and, box you. Where I feel like Sergey Pavlovich, if he doesn't get that one power shot, he can't beat you just by outstriking you. He's got to get the one-shot knockout, and if he doesn't knock you out in the first round, that's pretty much it. I think Ciryl Gane probably has better stamina than Sergey Pavlovich. If the fight gets into later rounds, I think Ciryl Gane will be a tougher matchup than, Sergey. But the winner of this is going to propel him into a very, very interesting spot. Now, unfortunately, neither of these guys are great grapplers. I think Aspinall and John Jones are both great grapplers. So I think the winner of this is going to have a tough time with that. But hey, the winner of this, gets a title shot, and anything could happen in that title shot. And I think these are the two guys that are the most deserving. I know Jelton Almeida was really, really fighting to get Ciryl Gane. But after his loss to Curtis Blades, I think Volkov was way, way more deserving. And I think Jelton Almeida's got a couple more wins to do before he gets into this position. But I think these are the perfect two guys and the best guys that the UFC could have picked for this fight.
Yeah, I think so too. Both of these guys, Ciryl Gane's headlined shows in France before, sold out arenas. Also been pay-per-view main event. Alexander Volkov has, been a champion in Bellator, and then also, been in the main events of some of these Apex cards and Fight Night cards. So both of these guys are household names. They've both been on, a tear kind of recently. And I want to see if Alexander Volkov has improved since their first meeting. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting. I'm super, super excited for this one.
Do you think it needs to be 5 rounds?
I feel like it should. I feel like it needs to be a 5-round co-main event because I really think that the winner of this is going to be fighting in a 5-round fight. And I think a 5-round fight probably favors Volkov in that aspect. And I think that would give us a much closer fight in a 5-round fight than a 3-round fight.
I think so too.
We got another rumor for a potential fight at UFC France. We got 2 middleweights, 2 rising middleweights who are trying to put themselves in position for a title contender. We got Nassourdine Imavov going up against Brandon Allen, who Brandon Allen's been on the tear, and Imavov has looked great in his last few fights. What are your thoughts on this matchup, Brett?
Yeah, Imavov is really coming on. He's gathered a wealth of experience in contests with former champion Sean Strickland, amongst other. He's got good striking, also has a good ground game to go with it. I think he's one of the most well-rounded fighters that we have at the middleweight division. But Brendan Allen, he's tremendous on the ground, his submission ability, and then also, he stopped fighters standing recently. Brendan Allen has improved significantly since his loss to Sean Strickland. Both of these guys, now Imavov lost by decision. Brendan Allen was knocked out by Sean Strickland. That's their similar opponent that they have on their records. I actually think that Brendan Allen might win this fight, but I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, I've been very, very high on Brendan Allen. I really, really wanted to see him fight, Veretti. Before he pulled out and he had to fight Chris Curtis again. But he was able to, revenge his loss against Chris Curtis. He was, it would have been nice to see him fight a guy like Marvin Vettori. But now he gets, Nassourdine Imavov, who's coming off of a great win against a guy who a lot of people were clamoring for a title shot, and that's Jared Cannonier. A lot of people were clamoring, saying they wanted them guys to have a rematch because of potentially their early stoppage. But I think Imavov got that win. I think he deserved it. And I think both these guys are fighting each other at the perfect moment. Right now the middleweight's kind of a tough, division right now. You got Sean Strickland who's probably get the next title shot. You got Robert Whittaker out there. Who knows what's going to happen with Hamza? I don't know what's going to happen with him. I don't even bring up his name anymore when we talk about the middleweight division. So honestly, where I think this could actually end up going is, you got Izzy versus Dricus. That's definitely going to happen. I think UFC will do the right thing and get Strickland the next title shot. So you got to have a number 1 contenders match. And you got Robert Whittaker sitting out there. Him and Hamza were supposed to be the number 1 contenders match. So why not just take the winner of this and put him against Robert Whittaker and what could be the next number 1 contenders match for the division when you have Strickland fight the winner of Izzy and Dricus next?
Yeah, I like that. I think that Paulo Costa has got to be in the equation somewhere. I know he just lost, but he's above these guys in the rankings nonetheless still. Brendan Allen, if he gets a victory, I think is knocking on the doorstep, but I think he's probably 1 to 2 fights away, and Imavov probably the same thing. But the middleweight division right now, everybody's talking about the people who aren't contenders yet. The people with the potential, like Hamzat, like Joe Pyfer, like Bo Nichols. So I think there's a lot of potential at middleweight. I think there's going to be a lot of turnover in the rankings here in the next year or two. Some of the names that we see now might not be in the top 15 here in short order. So, middleweight is, to me, the most wide open division right now outside of the top 5. So I'm very interested to see how this fight goes. But to throw him to a Robert Whittaker or be in a number one contenders fight, maybe a little bit too soon. But, if they run out of options and Whittaker needs a fight, the winner of this certainly wouldn't, I wouldn't be disappointed in seeing that.
Yeah, and you were mentioning Hamzat, and you were mentioning Costa. I think they should just reschedule those guys. I think that would be a perfect matchup. I don't think Hamzat deserves a number one contenders match or a title shot, coming back. I think they should test him against Paulo Costa at actual middleweight. It'll be his first actual top 10 middleweight because we all know Kamaru Usman's a 170, not a 185. So that would be an interesting matchup if they decide that go that way. But like you said, Robert Whittaker is a veteran in the game, and given Robert Whittaker against the winner of this, that would be a tough ask from either Imavov or Brandon Allen.
Yeah, and honestly, if you're Whittaker and you just took on Aliskerov, a relative unknown, and he might not necessarily know who these guys. I know he knows who these guys are, but it wouldn't get him up in the morning like a Sean Strickland fight would. And being a former champion, Robert Whittaker, I feel like he doesn't want to waste his performances against people that he might not necessarily deem are on his level quite yet or have earned the opportunity to be in the cage with him.
So maybe if Strickland is going to get the next title shot, then instead of rebooking Costa and Hamzat, what about rebooking Whittaker and Hamzat in a number one contenders match?
Yeah, I like that, but honestly, I think these guys got to throw money at Sean Strickland and have him fight Whittaker. That's the fight, man. I mean, it really is best cardio in the UFC and Sean Strickland versus maybe the most technical guy on the feet outside of Izzy Adesanya and the professional kickboxers, but a former champion too, and Robert Whittaker, both of them former champions. You can put that on a fight night card that headlines on ESPN or ABC and pull in a lot of viewers, massive amounts of viewers. So, I really like that contest stylistically, and I think it's what has to be done for the division. So when you put both of those together, I know that Strickland doesn't want it and thinks that he beat Dricus and needs the next title shot. But what if Ciryl Adesanya goes and beats Dricus du Plessis, and we're sitting here and Adesanya's got to wait another 3 months? And now we don't know if Dricus is going to fight him again. And it's up in the air who Adesanya's next opponent could be. Is he going to go up for Pereira? Now Sean Strickland's in a situation where he's waiting like Michael Chandler 6, 8, 9 months for a contest that may be make-believe. If he has Robert Whittaker in front of him right now and the UFC's offering him more money than maybe he makes normally, I think that's something that he's got to do.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think, I am among the the party that thinks Strickland deserves a title shot without having to fight Whittaker. But, I would love to see that fight, and I would think that would be an exciting fight to watch.
Yeah.
The UFC has been trying to add another fight to UFC 305. Ciryl Adesanya has been clamoring to get Dan Hooker on the card, and they might be getting their wish. The UFC is trying to get Mateusz Gamrot versus Dan Hooker on UFC 305. I think this would be a great fight. Mateusz Gamrot, like I said before, I think he's a future title contender. He's put together some great wins and he has some great victories. And Dan Hooker is trying to, move his way up the division. He did have a good win in his last fight. But what are your thoughts? And if they get this fight together, would you be excited for this fight, Brett?
Yeah, I would. I think it's an interesting stylistic fight between a striker and Dan Hooker and a credentialed grappler and Mateusz Gamrot. I think that Gamrot would have a significant advantage on the ground. I think he'd be able to win this fight by decision and, implement his grappling style. He has one of the best cardio in his division, and his energy level is very high. We see him shoot for takedown after takedown and kind of chain things together, kind of like we see Merab do at a lower weight class. So I really like Mateusz Gamrot, just like you do. And I think that if he does get matched up with Dan Hooker, it favors him stylistically a lot.
Yeah, this may be, a striker versus grappler matchup. Dan Hooker's tough, and he definitely could strike with the best of them. But I would have to favor, Mateusz Gamrot, and that's why I've been, clamoring for Mateusz Gamrot to be really more considered as a potential, title contender for Islam Makhachev. Given his grappling, I think he'd be a tough matchup for Islam. I think Mateusz Gamrot's going to go on a nice little run here. And I wouldn't be surprised if, at least by 2025, we're going to be seriously talking about Gamrot as a future title contender for Islam Makhachev. But I do like Dan Hooker. I think he's a super, super exciting fighter. And I wouldn't be, disappointed if he went in there and got the win. I love Dan Hooker. I love his mentality. I love his toughness. And I think there's not a guy that probably deserves it more than Dan Hooker. So I love this matchup for both guys. And I think this is a type of matchup that could propel one of these guys into one of those, potential top tier contending matchups later on.
Yeah, I agree.
Now we're gonna break down the UFC, fight night card. We got some interesting matchups. We have our main event. We got Amanda Lumos versus Verna Jarabhaba. It's gonna be an interesting matchup. How do you see this one going, Brett?
Man, I got to tell you, Anthony, I think this is the worst fight night card maybe in the history of the sport. Like last week wasn't knock your shoes off exciting with name value, but this week's even worse. So I know we got a bunch of good pay-per-views coming up. We got the Sphere. We got potentially John Jones. We're talking about McGregor coming back. But, I mean, we're in a wasteland right now. We're in the middle of the desert with no water.
Yeah, I agree. But if I pronounce the names incorrectly.
Yeah, I mean, Verena Jandiroba. Jandiroba is, I think, how they pronounce it on the broadcast officially. But she's a good fighter. She's got a good ground game. Amanda Lemos is very aggressive. We've seen her face, respected contenders in the past. But I'm going to go with Jandiroba in this one. Quick analysis. I think she's got better ground game and will probably win by decision.
Well, I guess we're going to have a real quick analysis because that's exactly what I have, too. I think she's a dangerous grappler. I think Lumos is a great striker, but, I think this matchup, the grappling is going to overshadow the striking. And I think Verna, has been on a nice little, win streak as well. And I think she's going to win the fight by decision.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Now we have a fight amongst two solid fighters. We got Yong Hong Park going up against Brad Tavares. I think both these guys are actually two solid fighters. I think when you dig more into it, I think, you see that both guys have, lost to really, really good fighters. And, they beat all the guys who are pretenders. They lose the contenders, but they beat all the pretenders. And I think this is going to be an interesting matchup to see. Not saying that these guys are, gatekeepers or anything. But both these guys, like I said, beat up on the bad guys and lose to the good guys. I'm going to go with Park in this one. I think he's in his prime, at 33 years old. Brad Tavares is a little bit on the older side. I think, Park's got a little bit better ground game. So I'm going to go with Park in this one by decision.
Yeah, I actually like this fight. These are two all-action vets. The Iron Turtle, Jun Park, he's a very tough fighter, gives one to take one. We've seen him win by knockout. He's got heavy hands. I'm going to take Jun Park in this one as well. I think that he gets this fight done by decision. Brad Tavares is a very tough customer, fought guys in the past like Yoel Romero, and he's a very athletic fighter and can get this fight done on the feet potentially. But Jun Park has a very good chin. So I'm going to go with the chin and power of Jun Park, and I think he's going to get this one done by decision.
Yeah, I agree. I think another fight that's one of the best fights on this fight card, we got Cody Durden going against Bruno Silva. Silva's on a 3-fight win streak after his 2 losses to 2 very good ranked flyweights. Cody Durden was on a 4-fight win streak before losing to the same flyweight that beat Bruno Silva in Tajir. So both guys are, I think, great fighters. I think Silva is the better striker. But again, I think Durden's the better grappler. And I think he's going to use the ground game in this one as well. And I think Cody Durden's going to get the win by decision and a very, very close decision win. How do you see this one going, Brett?
Yeah, 3 wins in a row for Bruno Silva. Just beat Tyson Nam. Cody Durden has won 4 out of his last 5, but just lost to Tagir Ulanbekov. Cody Durden's losses to Tagir Ulanbekov and then Muhammad Makayev, and they're not bad losses. Those guys are tip of the spear type of people at the flyweight division, guys that are going to be ranked in the top 10 moving forward. I think that Tagir's outside the top 10 currently, but he's someone with massive potential that we've been high on as well. And then obviously Muhammad Makayev is one of the best fighters in the world at 125 pounds. And he's very young and has high potential. Maybe he's going to be one of the best fighters in all of the UFC. So we're going to have to wait and see. But I think Cody Durden is a good wrestler. He's a collegiate wrestler and, has that American wrestling tattoo and takes guys to the ground. And I think that he's going to try and take Bruno Silva to the ground in this one and try and wrestle him and control him against the cage. Bruno Silva is going to try and land devastating strikes and stop him on the feet. I got Cody Durden in this one by points, but Bruno Silva could get it done if he can stop the takedown.
So it seems like we pretty much agree on every fight, this week. We do got some other, exciting fights. I would have to agree with you, Brett. When I did look at this card, I try to do everything I could to try to hype myself up for some of these fights. I don't want to, make the fight fans think, they shouldn't tune in, because they should tune in every week for UFC. But this is definitely probably one of the worst fight nights that we've talked about, and it's definitely one of the weaker ones. Thank God we got Jake Paul and Mike Perry, and thank God we got some great, UFC fight cards coming up after this. We got UFC Saudi Arabia, we got UFC in Manchester, we got the fight card UFC 305, so that should make up for it. But there are some exciting fights that really, really stand out to me. We got Hyder Mill going up against Hong Yong Lee. I think both are rising featherweights. Lee is undefeated in the UFC, and Emil is 9-0 in his entire career. Both guys got a lot of finishes, so I think this will be a very exciting fight that doesn't go to distance. And I think both these guys, given their track record and what they've accomplished, and the trajectory that they have, I think the winner of this may propel the next fighter into getting a ranked opponent in their next matchup. Is there any fights that stand out to you, Brett?
I think that's a good one. Hyder Emil just burst on the scene, stopping Fernie Garcia. We're going to see how good Lee is this weekend. I think that's going to be a good fight. But the one that I think that fight fans should tune in for, and I think there's no chance that this will be a boring fight, is between Cody Gibson and Brian Boom Boom Kelleher. We've seen both of these guys, lose some fights in the past, but they're all action fighters. They're both aggressive and have similar styles. I think they're going to go in there and have a very entertaining performance for fight fans. It might not be the most technical, but I think this is going to be a blood and guts war on the prelims.
Yeah, I agree. That's everything that we have this week. We'll have plenty more news to break. Next week, obviously, next episode, we're going to be recapping the Jake Paul fight. We'll obviously make sure, fight fans, you guys tune in Saturday at 10 Eastern Standard Time, because we're going to be going live. We're going to be breaking down the Jake Paul Mike Perry fight, and then we'll also be giving our recap on the show that Tuesday after at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just make sure that you're following us and following Puncher's Chance Podcast on all social media on Punch ETB. Make sure to follow the Empty the Bench Podcast Network on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network, and follow our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network for all our shows and other ETB Network news. If you can't watch Puncher's Chance, then take us on the road and listen to us with your AirPods on any time you can.
Catch us this Saturday. We're going to be breaking down the Jake Paul and Mike Perry fight at 10:30 Eastern Time. You can join me, Anthony, and Pat Dana, the producer from MMA Outsiders. We're also going to be watching the co-main event between Amanda Serrano and Stevie Morgan. Thanks for joining us, fight fans, and we'll catch you next week.
See ya.
See ya.